Alright, welcome you guys to the presentation we're having today. Usually you see me at kind of live videos for the Dr. G show that we have every week for the last 4 years. We had 28 of these talks planned, several at churches, several at Natural Grocers and OptiLife, but because of the coronavirus reaction, we're going to go ahead and do this as a recording. But you guys can certainly post questions, ask questions. We have a dedicated YouTube channel for this now, which is the Dr. G Show. So I'll post that link, and I'll post these on Facebook too, since most of you guys for the last 4 years have watched the show on Facebook Live. So that being said, today we're going to talk about something that I really enjoy. I've been doing this talk since 2012, so about 8 years. So I really enjoy this topic, and it's one that really can dramatically impact you and your family. So we're going to talk about the cholesterol myth and why it's killing you and your family. So as we follow along here, so you'll have these slides to where you can kind of go through this too, and I'm going to figure out how to make this work. But thanks to Lane, she helped me resolve this issue so we can go through this. So now we can do it a recorded way. So alright, for those of you that don't know me by now, right, I'm Dr. Patrick Garrett. Usually people call me Dr. G. And I've been practicing for about 17 years or so, and I got a doctorate in chiropractic, also went to medical school for 3.5 years, did 3,500 hours of clinical rounds, and I quit that about 6 months from graduating to practice functional and lifestyle medicine, which is what I do now, right? So I got very, very frustrated, as many of you guys have been through this system before, of feeling like we're chronically managing things, and I wanted to help fix things. So the whole type of practice that I do now is very, very different. I do functional lifestyle medicine, which is for the most part teach people how things work, teach them what we do to mess it up, and then things just return to normal. So we deal with the most complicated patients from all around the world, and people that have been all the way to the Mayo Clinic and had stuff for decades, and now they don't. So it's a really satisfying way of practicing, but it also means no gimmicks and nonsense and, you know, typical kind of stuff we go through within chronic management kind of practices. So we do things very different. It's fix, not manage. I do lots of talks. I actually was a postgraduate educator for a dual diplomate program out in Colorado. And then I've been a national speaker all over. And then last year I had the wonderful opportunity to be the keynote speaker at the International Symposium on Health and Wellness in Bangkok, Thailand. So that was wonderful. I got to go there and fly 15 hours to speak for one. But so within, I have lots and lots of post-grad education, but I've tailored mine to lifestyle medicine stuff that I really enjoy. But Harvard had a really unique one, and at their lifestyle medicine program, the first one that I took was on Crohn's, and it said patient has Crohn's, what are they doing to cause it? And really their coursework is designed to do exactly what I do now, which is identify how the physiology works, identify what we do to mess it up, and teach people to stop messing it up so their body can return to normal. So after those courses at Harvard, it changed everything. So that's why I do what I do now. Also did postdoc continuing education for lifestyle medicine at Yale Medical School. Did a biomedical engineering open course with Dr. Salzman at Yale. Did open course epigenetics where we looked at epigenetic controls, those things you can turn on and off genes, at the University of Melbourne. And then annually I participate in the postgrad education for dermatology at Johns Hopkins. So diplomate certifications, super nerd, part of a lot of different things. I serve on lots of different boards, but I have 4 postdoctoral diplomates that I've earned over the years, 2 in functional medicine, 1 in clinical nutrition, and then board certified in integrated medicine. And then have a lot of other board eligible stuff that I've completed. And then clinical clerkships and rounds. So I've had the wonderful, unique opportunity of going to a medical magnet in high school, doing first 2 years of high school and then last 2 years of clinical clerkships, which I don't, no, I do have that on there for manipulative medicine. But I also did pediatrics at Cook's Children in high school. So that was a really unique opportunity that we had to test to even get in the program. So, and then, of course, in grad school, I did lots and lots of clinical hours. And, of course, in medicine, you know, I got to do first assist on a lot of surgeries, trained under pretty much the highest end of instructors, which was a really unique opportunity. As I said before, I'm part of a lot of different things, but also I serve as a leader on several different boards and several different programs. So I really like to be involved with what's going on, and it's very satisfying. And then I also have the privilege of doing research on protogenomic psychiatry at KU, which was a really unique opportunity presented to me. Hopefully we will finish our research this year, which will be awesome. So that's pretty cool, and that's on kind of genetics, epigenetics of, we're actually studying the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase pathway for mood, behavior, that kind of stuff. So, and then I used to have a healthy cooking show on TV for a couple years on Channel 43, and then I do Cooking After Dark with Dr. G and a few other little things like that. So, enough about me. All that just means is I'm a nerd and I love what I do. So, outside of that, so today we want to talk about really how that cholesterol myth is killing you and your family, but really what is heart disease and what is cholesterol and really what is the actual cause and how can we change this, right? So we are going the wrong direction. We're hitting the bullseye on the wrong target when it comes to heart disease in America. The rest of the world is doing pretty good, but America, we're really messing up with this. So we want to talk about what is cholesterol, is it good or bad, what's the real causes of heart disease, and then how can we actually deplaque our own arteries. So we'll talk about the physiology of that too. So cholesterol myth, right, is part of a kind of food as medicine approach. There's several myths that we're going to go through with this. So the first myth is that high cholesterol actually causes heart attacks. And maybe you don't know that by now that this is a myth, that it's not true, but we have enough quantitative data now that we can even show what the results are for following this myth medically. So, and then lowering your cholesterol will extend your lifespan, right? So that's the second premise that we actually are haunted by within practice. And you got to think, like, I don't know, I mean, at some point we got to go back and say, all right, we screwed up, kind of like we did with eggs and we did with meat and we did with saturated fat. And so, you know, there's still this kind of like myth based on those two that we got to continually overcome. So, and a lot of false information. So then we'll finish up with talking about how to present and reverse heart disease. So definitely post your guys' questions as we go through this. I know you guys are watching this offline instead of being at the actual presentation, but this will be an easier way for you guys to share this with your friends and family, since usually at our talks we only have, you know, up to, I don't know, 20 to 40 people typically. So this would be a little bit easier way for you guys while you're in quarantine to watch, you know, something about your health. So, all right, well, what the hell is cholesterol in the first place, right? So we hear a lot about cholesterol, usually bad stuff, but cholesterol is a building block in your body, right? I have this big old chart in my office that's about 3 foot by 5 foot that I show patients, and it's every biochemical process in your body. But the bottom quarter of it is basically cholesterol and then what cholesterol builds in your body. So the term is just a Greek term, it's Latin, but it's chol. That's why you get cholesterol, or you'll see other, especially Latin derivatives of that too when it comes to diseases. But if you take chol and sterol, you get cholesterol. So these are steroids or sterols, And 80% of your cholesterol is made by your liver. So, when you look at those numbers, just know that 80% is what you make, right? And we'll talk about why that's so important. Only 20% really comes from diet. So your body gets to decide as food moves through whether it's going to pull those in or let you poop them out, basically, right? So that's why there's another type of medication where it blocks either bile production or it blocks the absorption of cholesterol. And then, of course, one of the famous ones is Ally, right? So Ally, it causes you to poop your pants. So they try to use this cholesterol in chips, but they had warnings that it would cause you to poop your pants. So sudden anal leakage. So then that didn't pan out too well. So, some of them are not so glamorous. And then 80% or 60 to 80% of your brain, it's cholesterol. There's another falsehood or a myth that, you only use 10% of your brain. Well, that's not true technically, because only 10% of your brain is neurons. 90% of your brain is fat. So it's like 10% wires in a big bowl of Jell-O, basically, right? That 90% Jell-O protects that 10% of wiring, so you can get in car accidents and get hit and talk smack and get punched in a bar and you're fine, right? So then the question is, of that 10%, then what do we actually use, right? So that's kind of a misnomer. And then 20% of every cell wall, so every cell in your body, you have 50 to 100 trillion cells in your body, and as those turn over on a regular basis, you have to have a constant supply of cholesterol to build new walls. So that's hugely important, right? And then the most important thing that we forget about is that cholesterol is a fat-based hormone that makes things like vitamin D and progesterone and testosterone and estradiol and estrone and estril and anti-aging hormone like DHEA, even pregnenolone. So you'll see these people supplementing these things, but they're also taking medications to block the production of these things, which then becomes ridiculous, because we know synthetic estrogens cause heart disease. We know synthetic testosterone causes heart disease. It's not a good premise. In fact, we know, and I don't know that we're mentioning this, so I'll try to remember this. But just so you know, if you take a bioidentical hormone, you downregulate your own production. So again, bioidenticals are not helpful long term. Synthetics are dangerous long term, which we found with the 2005 Women Initiative study. But the first thing is, why the hell are you exhausting your hormones? Or are you taking medication that literally suppresses your hormones? Then stop doing that, right? So, all right. So cholesterol basically looks like this. So when you look at other hormones that are derivatives, you'll notice this basic template of pattern there, right? So those little C's are carbons, the H's are hydrogens, and so usually with carbon there should be 4 things attached. So you'll see a carbon attached to a carbon. That leaves 3 extra things, so those will be hydrogens. So that's a complete cholesterol molecule there. So then if we take that, so like that bottom part of my chart goes through all this biochemical process, but this is like a nice little tidy map of that. So you can see where cholesterol, that's oh, I'm sorry. All right. I thought I shut that off. So even at a recorded presentation, I'm still getting phone calls. Okay. So you'll see is if you go down here, you'll see pregnenolone, right? So pregnenolone is the kind of mother of the rest of these hormones. You see it make progesterone. You'll see it make cortisone, cortisol, your stress hormone. This regulates kind of fluid in your tissue, so hypertension and regulating like edema, that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about where that messes up. What you don't see on here is that as it goes downward, you'll see it turn into anti-aging hormone, testosterone, and so on. So this is my little simple chart of this, right? So you eat plants that have phytosterols in there, and those phytosterols then go to your liver and you produce cholesterols from that, right? So a lot of times people don't like phytoestrogens, but phytoestrogens people like crap on soy and say, oh, soy causes heart disease or cancer because it has estrogen in there. But it's not estrone, estradiol, or the phytoestrogen derivatives that we make from that are causing those problems. It's the synthetic estradiol. It's the bioidentical ones from things like cow milk or goat milk that are trying to grow estrogenic tissue. After you go through puberty, you shouldn't be growing, so you're taking something to grow that tissue. So that's a whole nother story that we'll talk about later. But otherwise, phytosterols are good. All plants help build your cholesterol. So then with that cholesterol, you'll see that it creates pregnenolone. And pregnenolone is like pregnant. So it's like the mother of the rest of these hormones. Now, I have noticed recently that some docs are supplementing pregnenolone. But then the question is, why the hell is your diet not producing phytosterols? And why is your liver not converting it to cholesterol into pregnenolone? Right? So cause a problem, and then we treat it with a chronic management solution, as opposed to saying stop cause the problem. So pregnenolone gets converted directly into progesterone. Now, progesterone is your happy hormone. That's the one that we use for fertility too. So in a country where 1 in 7 are infertile, are we causing it, right? So that's the first thing, is if you take something that blocks cholesterol, or you do a diet to lower cholesterol, or use niacinamide as a natural way to downregulate cholesterol, then you make less happy hormone, but you also downregulate the hormone that is supposed to surge to maintain pregnancy. So with progesterone, it should spike like that to maintain pregnancy, and that's where like most moms are like, oh my gosh, I glowed, I felt so amazing when I was pregnant. Yeah, because you were jacked up on happy hormone, right? So if you can't get that up because you are suppressing it, then you should not end up with maintaining pregnancy. So then you end up with the most common side effect of pregnancy, which is autoabortion. The body says we can't do it, we don't have enough hormones or nutrition, let's reabsorb that fetus and then start over again, right? So I think there's a good book, Silent Spring, from back in the 70s, and it talks about this too. And then the other thing with progesterone, so that's your happy hormone, it gets directly exhausted as cortisol, which is your stress hormone. So you think about the exploitation of stress through like what's called input theory or adaptation theory. So when you look at something like the hysteria response to like the coronavirus, oh my gosh, people are going to exhaust their hormones like crazy over something that probably isn't all that bad, or that the media is kind of hyping, or, maybe you have direct health concerns, like you have pre-existing conditions and you're, over 60, 70 years old. Well, okay, yeah, maybe you should worry, but more preparing and less worrying, right? So it'd be nice when we have like a directive of like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to shut it down, wait a couple weeks or a couple months, and like have some kind of like answer. But all that like no answer creates exhaustion for people, which then stills their progesterone, which then makes them stressed but not happy. So then over there at pregnenolone, that converts over to DHEA. Now DHEA is your largest amount of hormone in the body, and that EA is epiandrogen. So when you look at DHEA, this is your anti-aging hormone. This is, the people that look like they're 10 years younger than they are flush with this. But you've seen people that look like they're 10 years older than they really are. And those people have exhausted this hormone. And so since it's an epiandrogen, it goes right into testosterone. And testosterone, one of the ways that we clinically measure that symptom-wise is it's your get up and go, and it's your sex drive. So if your get up and go has gone up and went, you kind of know what your sex life is like too, right? So I always ask people, so what's your pep like? If they're like, it's gone, you're like, I know what your sex life is like too. So, and then testosterone is converting into estrogens, and again, you have 3. I only put 2 on here, but estrone, estriol, right? Those 2 are the ones that maintain estrogenic tissue, so then you don't end up with endometriosis and fibroids and fibrocystic breasts and female cancers, and now say secondary puberty cancers in men like prostate and breast tissue stuff. But the estradiol is the real notorious one out of those. Now, it's supposed to be low in humans, but we drink milk, which is astronomically high in those, because you're trying to grow a baby, and adults should not be growing. So then that becomes things like endometriosis and fibroids and polycystic ovarian, breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, male breast enlargement, male lactation, and prostate problems. So, don't blame estrogen. Blame the synthetic sources of that or the bioidentical ones from our diet and lifestyle. So that's a whole nother talk that we do. So with that, you can see this is the natural physiology of what's going on here. So you can be healthy, happy, energetic. So when we say, what the hell is cholesterol? It's awesome. It's awesome, right? It's the thing that allows you to have stress and cope, to be healthy and happy, to be energetic, to be reproductive, to also, be aging slower and have energy and sex drive, That's how it works. So cholesterol is great. There wasn't like this, meeting that God had at some point being like, these damn Americans, I'm sick and tired of their bull crap. I'm going to make bad cholesterol just to kill them because, we don't like them. So that's not how it works. So we'll talk more about that. So the first myth that we're going to debunk is cholesterol causes heart disease. It sounds pretty good, but it's not true. So how did heart disease become an epidemic? People need a cause, right? So we got to blame something. And then fat didn't pan out, so eggs didn't pan out, meat didn't pan out, so we got to blame something, right? So then we have cholesterol. And it's always better if you have something you can blame that you also have something to sell. So when we look at heart disease, this is pretty typical of all disease charts in the United States. So we have times where disease is very low or non-existent, and then we do something here to create an epidemic of that disease, and then we maintain that epidemic because it's usually profitable. Now, the only time that heart disease has gone down in the U.S. is around the 2000s. And that's not because we suddenly started having like better health, better quality health, anything like that. It's because by that time we got really good at taking the veins from your legs and sewing them on your hearts. We got really good at doing imaging of the heart, and they go, oh my gosh, you need a bypass. So we'll take veins from your legs, sew it on your heart, put stents in there, do cabbages. That's where we're at now, right? So that's where we see the only drop really since 1900 in heart disease, is we just got better at prolonging the process mechanically, right? So that means we not only cause this, but we cause that epidemic. And, if you look at that, it was 1900 to say 1960, 1970 was the peak. And that's where you started, I think it was back in the 20s, they were thinking it was eggs. By the 1960s, they were like, it's meat. By the 1970s, they were like, it's fat. But none of that panned out. None of it. Especially when you look at other countries. You're like, well, why do they get to eat like that and have less heart disease, right? Because it has nothing to do with diet. Nothing. So you can see this when you look at other research. It's we could do that all day long, but it's all the same, So the heart attack rates, the second heart attack rates, the hospitalization rates, it's all the same. It's all just poof like this, right? No surprises. So then, with that, we would say, if we prove something to be true, so we're doing the scientific method, right? This is my hypothesis. Cholesterol causes heart disease. So if I lower cholesterol, thus I would see heart disease go down, right? And we could virtually eliminate it. So if cholesterol causes heart disease, it also has to be true everywhere, right? We don't have just American cholesterol in American hearts, although some Americans might think this. We're all the same physiological pathways, same physiology, same mechanics. So we should see this across the board. But like every single disease that we have, Americans are the best at causing it, right? So we create the epidemics, and then we share our lifestyle, and we see those things go in other places. But heart disease is a little unique. So do other countries have the same high cholesterol, and do they share the same heart attack rates? Well, this is very interesting, right? So when you look at like Australia, they have 75% less heart attacks. 75%. But yet they have higher cholesterols. Japan has 70% less. France has 60% less. Italy, which I'm surprised, only has 35% less. And Poland's only 20%. But that OECD health data from the world, when you look at those rates and their lifestyles, again, same heart, same physiology, but very different lifestyles. And so we then say, how are we doing in America, right? Compared to some other countries. But when you compare our stuff to other countries, we call it a paradox, right? So we're like, okay, cholesterol causes heart disease in America. Cholesterol causes heart disease, right? Unless you live in France. Well, why is it different there? That's a paradox, right? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't form to our hypothesis. So the average cholesterol in most countries, including like Europe and France, is 250 milligrams per deciliter, right? 250. So they have 60% less. So they have a higher than that 200 number, but yet they have 60% less heart disease and stroke. So what the hell's going on, right? So what about Germany? What about the Swiss? What about every other country but America? Well, we call those all the Swiss paradox, the European paradox, the every other country but American paradox, because our hypothesis does not translate across borders. Somehow, a plane trip changes your cholesterol from good to bad, right? Or bad to good. So, or we might believe that, God just loves socialized countries more. And so those people deserve better health, and so they just have less heart attacks, right? He only makes the bad cholesterol here because he hates our freedom. So that, maybe, right? No. Okay. So then we look at this little chart, which I like, because it compares the paradox here. Now, the U.S. is right there by Russia on the left side of this. So we're right about here. So if you look at these rates, you have the average cholesterol rate. So the average cholesterol for most countries is about 240, 250. That's right here, okay? So some of these even have higher. And especially if you look at, let me look at that. Does it say Southland? I don't know. All right, so, the one on the far right, oh, Switzerland. Ah, yes, the Swiss paradox, right? Switzerland has the highest cholesterol, but almost the absolute lowest heart attack rates. So you kind of see they kind of wax and wane through there, fairly normal. But then as you have countries like Russia and America that artificially lower cholesterol, you see a sudden spike of heart disease and death rates. So it doesn't make any sense. Then we say, all right, well, let's look at research, right? We got like 1 out of 10 people in America on at least just one drug, Lipitor. So most Americans are on cholesterol-lowering meds, and 1 out of 2 has a risk of heart disease or heart attack or stroke now in America. More women are likely to have heart attacks than men for the first time in history, so we have to literally retrain doctors. So this keeps still getting worse, but what do the numbers look like? So more people are on statins, but yet we found that research from the published from emergency rooms shows that there's about equal number of heart attacks for people with 300 milligrams versus less than 200 milligrams. They're nearly identical. And so again, that number doesn't mean anything. And so then they said, well, 70% of those that have lower cholesterol that come to the ER for heart attacks, 70% have lower than 200 cholesterol artificially. So you are now more likely for the first time in history to have a heart attack or stroke after lowering your cholesterol. You are more likely to have a heart attack after lowering your cholesterol. And that's because it has nothing to do with heart attacks. But it puts you at a higher risk for heart attacks, and we'll look at why that is towards the end of this. The other thing is, well, then they said, well, maybe it's not the total number. We were just kidding about the total number. It's probably LDLs, low-density lipoproteins, because, of course, God made bad cholesterol to kill Americans because he hates our freedom. Because LDLs don't seem to matter if you go to any other country in the world. So, the problem with that is we say there's good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, but that's not even true either. So that's a whole myth in its own, which we'll go through. So this being said, we say cholesterol causes heart disease. Our hypothesis is that our outcome says you are more likely to have a heart attack or stroke by lowering your cholesterol. So then we have, again, the I don't know, the denial of like, well, it's just bad cholesterol. It's not the good cholesterol. But what's crazy is you'll have someone with their cholesterol of like, say it's 199 or something, right? And their LDLs are normal, but their HDLs are too low, right? Their high density lipoproteins are too low, which are really good antioxidants for reversing actual damage, right? There's really good cholesterol, and then there's good cholesterol, and then there's repair cholesterol. But if they raise that HDL, then the total cholesterol goes too high, and then you end up on a medication for lowering it. It's like literally having too much money as a problem. It's crazy. It is absolutely insane that we do this. So that being said, there is no bad cholesterol. So most people only get a cholesterol panel that's very, very limited, because the only goal with cholesterol testing is, are we going to put you on a drug or not? That's it. That's all it is. Even natural medicine, a lot of times it's just, are we going to give you niacinamide or, you know, some other chronic management supplement for that or not, right? But if you do what's called the old vertical analysis protocol, what's called VAP cholesterol, but now they got it way more complicated, and they call it a lipofraction analysis, you know, you learn a lot more about your cholesterol. So most people don't know that there are actually 3 HDLs. So you have high density lipoproteins, which literally just means you have a chylomicron, like a little fatty kind of sphere, which is why you wash your hands to get rid of the coronavirus, is it breaks that down and then encapsulates that, and then you wash it away. That's how soap works, right? But you can also use chylomicrons then to take and transport things like protein and fats. So a high-density lipoprotein would be a lot of protein, a little bit of fat in that little sphere, right? Low density would be then a little bit of protein, a lot of fat in there, and then VLDL is very low density lipoprotein, which means a whole lot of fat and a very, very, very little amount of protein. So again, it's not fat. Don't jump on that myth either, right? So with HDLs, these high-density ones, you actually have 3 different types, and they're not all protective of the heart. So you can have a really high HDL of like 60, 70, 80, right? We like to see them greater than 55, but all the way to 70, 80 would be wonderful. But what if they're the least protective? So then you have that kind of false sense. Now, HDLs are great indicators of what's going on with your lifestyle, because there's no meds to raise HDLs. HDLs are healthy fats and movement. So that's lifestyle. But then we look at LDLs. That's where they say, okay, fine, HDLs are good cholesterol, LDLs are bad cholesterol. But of course, that's ridiculous that only America has bad cholesterol, right? So when we look at LDLs, we can actually break that down. Now, you have a couple kind of genetic components here. One of them they have on here is LPA. LPA is what upregulates this. There's also ApoB100, which they don't show on this, which is something else we test. But ApoB100 is another process through LPA that then raises LDL. But the most important thing of this, and the IDL is kind of intermediate, you know, it's kind of in between high and low. But the most important thing is the LDL remnant patterns. So you'll see there pattern A, pattern B, and a mixed pattern. But this means that there's actually 2 different types of LDLs. You have large, fluffy LDLs, which are very cardioprotective, just like HDLs, right? So you can have a high HDL and a high LDL, and as long as that's pattern A, it's even more protective against heart disease, right? But if you have pattern B, this is where it gets a little different with our kind of explanations of physiology, right? And even lifestyle. Pattern B are small, dense LDLs. And what they do is repair. So sometimes you'll hear this kind of like, well, we see cholesterol in atherosclerosis or plaquing lesions in the arteries. Yeah, but why are they there? Well, they're there to repair damage. Okay, what caused all the damage, right? So I always give this kind of explanation of like, okay, say, I built a house before, right? And you're doing the sheetrock. Well, if somebody scratched the wall, you would hire an LDLB pattern to come in and patch that wall. So they'd take some spackle and they would go across there, right? Now, diet is what sands it back down and then you repaint it, which is a normal lifestyle, which is why Europeans can have inflammatory diets, but also they have so much anti-inflammatory that they can restore normal physiology back to the heart. So you'll see Japanese people smoke, but yet have less heart attacks and stroke because of it, right? So if repair comes in and fixes that damage, and then your diet sands it back down and paints it back to normal, you're fine. You can have all the people scratching your walls you want because your diet and lifestyle fixes arteries. But the American lifestyle and the American diet is cause lots of damage to the walls and do not repair or do not fix. So that means every time somebody scratches, I hire a spackle guy. He spackles over that spackle, and then spackles over that spackle, and spackles over that spackle, and no one is sanding this down through their diet, which then becomes a space-occupying lesion in your artery, or what we call plaquing. But is it the repair guy's fault? No, he's doing his damn job. The question is, why the hell do we have so much damage to repair? And that goes back to our inflammatory lifestyle. So when we look at the real causes, it'll become very apparent of like, yeah, okay, that's why we have it, right? But it is not LDL-B pattern's fault. It's only doing what it's programmed to do, which is why every other animal on Earth has LDL-B and A, and why every human on Earth has LDL-A and B, and we have the most heart attacks, and they don't, right? Because it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the inflammatory part of heart disease. If you look at VLDLs, that gets a little interesting. Usually, I don't know if you know this, but if you take VLDL on most labs and you multiply it times 5, that's the guesstimation for your triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are actually a concern. So triglyceride is 3 fatty acids and a glycerol. And really what it is if you eat too much sugar, then it transports it to make it fat. So fat does not make people fat. I don't know if you know that, but fat does not make you fat. The healthiest countries in the world, the skinniest countries eat more fat than Americans. Japanese eat the most fat of any country, right? And they're one of the skinniest countries on earth. So fat doesn't make us fat because fat becomes progesterone, testosterone, anti-aging hormone, vitamin D, every single cell in your body and in your brain and everything else. But consumption of excess sugar gets transported through triglycerides as fat, so then you don't become diabetic. If you can do more than you can transport, then you end up with high blood sugar, and then you become pre-diabetic and eventually diabetic. But again, that's pretty easy to fix, which today we'll talk about that too. That'll be our next presentation, is how to reverse type 2 diabetes with just lifestyle and diet. Like super, super easy to do. And we've been doing that for 17 years with patients. It's just teaching them to stop causing it. So that being said, when you do a VAP or a lipofraction, they actually count the VLDLs. But really, it's just diet. It's someone that's a vegan, that's healthy, not a sugartarian kind of vegan. They'll have triglycerides at say 30, right? So then their VLDLs should be around 6. If they're a healthy diet, it might be 80. But then you'll have people like 300, 400, 500, 1200. Like, yeah, you're super screwed. You need to settle this down, right? So that test looks like this. So this is the old school VAP. Now they're a little bit different. The lipofraction looks a little bit different, and there's graphs, and it's so much better now. But this is kind of an older version of kind of to show you that there's so much more to your cholesterol than they ever check that has to do with how well your body's dealing with inflammation, right? So not lower cholesterol, but fix why cholesterol LDL-B is elevated. So on this kind of patient here, you can see pattern A, pattern B's, they're all normal, right? But if you look down here, pattern B, small dense, repair. Not a lot of repair, but the large buoyant ones, the big ones of the LDL, that's the predominant pattern. So this person up here, when they look at their LDLs, oh my God, they're high. But they're high protective. So that's really good. Now, they do have a little bit of questionable stuff going on here with some LPA going on. So they got some repair going on, but overall they're doing pretty damn good. But look at their triglycerides. It's 36. So this is a really healthy diet kind of person. But their cholesterol is 265. Their HDLs are 65. If you knock that down, you can't do too much there, but sometimes you can knock down total cholesterol or HDLs, make the total cholesterol under 200. It looks really great, but their LDLs are off the chart. So their LDLs are elevated. So, they got mostly protection, but that LPA says they're probably doing some repair too. So, and see, here's your ApoB100. So these are restorative ones. So even though this patient looks really good, we need to then address why they have inflammatory stuff. So we might then look at something like homocysteine, or we might look at cardio C-reactive proteins and say, is there something else going on here that we need to deal with outside of just lifestyle? So this is a little chart I made up, but if you look at this, it's pretty simple. No matter what's wrong, it is healthy fat diet and movement. These are fruits and fish. This is healthy fats, and this is B vitamins. Healthy carbohydrates, again, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berry, legumes, and some movement. Same thing here. Like, it's not rocket science. This is like the Mediterranean diet, the Costa Rican diet, the Okinawa diet, the every other country but America diet. It's not rocket science why they have lower heart disease. If there is something wrong, the correction is lifestyle. Now, people can take supplements for it, but that's management. What we do here is functional lifestyle medicine, which is fix why the problem is the problem. And then if homocysteine's elevated, we deal with that. But that's just vitamin, which is dietary. So then we look at something like, how did this treatment even come about, right? Why the hell is 200 a number? And if you don't know this, 200, the number for cholesterol, is based on nothing. It is not based on current literature, research, peer-reviewed published studies. There's no country that's been shown that if we just lower below 200, then heart disease goes away. That's not true. 8 doctors got together, decided what the new number would be, and they were financially tied to a company that was going to come out with a new drug called Lipitor, which was based off of red yeast rice, which we'll talk about the guy that did that study too. So that number's made up. That's why when we look clinically back, it doesn't support our hypothesis. And that's why you'll see that, back, it's been a while now, but back in the day, you had people that were like, whoa, 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 my cholesterol was almost 300. And you said based on my age, I was tip-top shape. But back when we had cholesterol around 300, we had lower heart disease rates, right? Because the normal changed. That's all that changed. So we had higher heart disease, or I'd say higher medication use, because we lowered the number, which is where you see like the A1C going down, you'll see LDLs going down, because the whole goal is, we're all screwed, let's get people on meds earlier. And then we end up in a nation where 3 out of 4 people are chronically managing chronic conditions, and nobody's reversing jack crap. So when you look at things like medication approval, right? One interesting thing is just know, just in general, that pretty much all medications fail compared to placebo. Placebo's hope. You can give a sugar pill to a diabetic and tell them to lower their blood sugar. It lowers it, right? The placebo effect is not nothing. The placebo effect is belief. Belief changes physiology just as well as the nocebo effect does, right? So when you look at approval, you got to prove that your drug is better than placebo. I think it's at least 2 times, 2 different studies, and then you submit that to the FDA, and then hopefully there's not too many people that die, and the benefit-risk ratio is pretty good, right? So if I remember right, I think it's like, so if you look at 100 different patients, without statins, 3 people died in that control group, or in that group, right? But with statins, only 2 people died. But that really means that only 1% success rate with that. But there's a 5% a 5% risk that you'll have a permanent muscle wasting disease by taking this medication. So not only does that mean 99% of those people taking that medication won't have any benefit, but actually 5% will end up with a permanent muscle wasting disease. And then actually 100% will have all kinds of horrible problems that go along with taking a statin. And we'll go through that mechanism too. So that's not very successful. And in fact, what's called the TNT, total number, TNN, we'll look at the TNN on this too, which is basically after drugs have been out for a long time, we can then look and say, what is the total number to treat? TNT then, yeah. I don't know, we'll look at it. I think it's TNN. But the total number to treat will basically say how many people need to take this medication for one person to see a benefit, right? And then it looks at the complications and says, is it really worth it? So, red yeast rice, so that RYR. Don't take red yeast rice. It is the same thing. Actually, when I did statistics and research in grad school, my presentation was on Lipitor and red yeast rice, oddly enough, right? So I did this presentation for our research class, and, you know, the guy who discovered this, this is the craziest story, because I listed it on NPR Science Friday, but he studied, is a Japanese scientist, 3,000 different things, and none of them lowered cholesterol. And then he was about ready to give up, and he was just like, well, you know what? There's a spice that's similar to what we're doing. I'll try that yeast. And it actually lowered the cholesterol in their little clinical trial. So that became Lipitor. So red yeast rice and Lipitor, Lipitor was having a problem getting approved by the FDA because it was too close to red yeast rice. There wasn't enough difference for it to be unique enough to get its own patent. So there was some complication with that. But the risk of it is all kinds of horrible problems because we're blocking cholesterol production. So when we look, NNT, number needed treat. Oh, I said it wrong. Okay. So it's NNT. And you can look up this research. I can post the link for all the drugs too. But the NNT is the number needed to treat. So the benefits of the number of needed to treat for statins is now 1 in 217. So that original research where we said it was 1 out of 100, it is now worse. So 217 people need to take this for one person to avoid a non-fatal heart attack. And then it's 313 have to take this for one person to avoid a stroke. But the harm, so again, it's 1 out of 200, 1 out of 300. But harm-wise, the number needed to treat, 21 people, let's see, 1 out of every 21 people that take this medication will have permanent muscle waste, right? That was 5%. 1 out of 20, is that 5? I think that's still 5%. Will have a permanent muscle wasting disease. But 1 out of 200 will develop diabetes. And then diabetes will cause heart attacks and strokes, right? So, the This is all based off of, now this was 2012 cholesterol treatment trials that they created this from, but it's a meta-analysis. So basically, meta-analysis, you look at all the studies that are available, and then you compile that data, and then you come out with a summarization results from all the research available. So, holy crap. Holy crap. So that shows that it's virtually non-beneficial. When 1 out of 2 people have risk of heart disease and stroke, but only 1 out of 200 or 1 out of 300 will avoid the disease. So here's why it all goes haywire for us, okay? So any type of medication blocks a pathway, right? So we either upregulate or downregulate, turn off a switch or turn on a switch, whether we're talking about genetics or whether we're talking about physiology, right? Everything works off this sequential pathway. So when we look at something like the acetyl pathway for here, it goes through and then it makes mevalonic acid, and then that goes and helps the seleno pathway for thyroid, and then it makes this pyrophosphate conversions, and then it makes squalene, and then it makes cholesterol, right? So this pathway eventually leads to cholesterol. So if they block it here, it not only blocks cholesterol, but it blocks every single thing past that. And that's a big problem. That's where we see that risk go to hell, right? So when you block this pathway, you block selenoprotein, which then you end up with thyroid disease, so hypothyroidism. You gain weight, you get tired, you get brain fog, you fall apart, right? 1 out of 10 Americans has that now. But you also end up with neuromyopathy. And so neuro means nerve, myo means muscle, patho means pathology. So these are nerve muscle diseases. And then when you look at blocking the dolichol pathway, well, the dolichol pathway is what affects neuropeptides. So your brain communicates with your brain and everything else in your body through neuropeptides, or these nerve proteins. And then it messes up every single nerve function. So then the list of complications that you can cause from interrupting the dolichol pathway is all these vague general symptoms for all these different patients. And that blocks what's called cell signaling. And then, of course, we block the TAU pathway. Now, like Taoism, right, is good, but when you block that protein, then you get things like Lou Gehrig's disease or anterolateral sclerosis, where basically they start losing motor function in their extremities and they eventually can't breathe and they die. And then, of course, Alzheimerism, Parkinsonian isms. So Alzheimerism is neurofibrillary tangles, amyloid plaquing, but it's a post-death diagnosis. You have to cut the brain open and find these things, right? Otherwise, what if you're causing Alzheimer-like symptoms simply by taking a drug that causes that? But also dementia. Dementia is probably the most common thing that we see with patients now, between muscle weakness and I can't go up the stairs anymore, and I don't know what the hell I was going upstairs for in the first place. And I'm shaking all the time now, and I'm losing nerve function. So that's wonderful. Those are horrific, life-changing, life-altering, life-destroying diseases. Like, your whole quality of life after statins should go down the toilet. And then we save the worst for last. The other pathway with this is CoQ10. CoQ10 is how your heart, your brain, and every single tissue in your body makes energy. That requires CoQ10. So if you inhibit the pathway for CoQ10 so you can block cholesterol, you should have chronically fatigued patients. In fact, the heart should slow down, and so it has more pressure on it. So then it causes congestive heart disease, which then leads to pooling in the lungs, which then shortness of breath, fluid retention in the ankles. It will actually mess up mitochondrial dysfunction. So a lot of people, especially in functional medicine, are all like, "Oh, we got to mess with the mitochondria." But how about stop causing the problem, right? That should be the first goal here. And then, of course, diabetes, which is 1 out of every 2 Americans is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And so we slow down function, so they become diabetic, and then we give them medication as preventive medicine for their heart, which then makes it harder for them to ever get out of diabetes. And of course, weight gain, which is leading to prediabetes and diabetes. But liver inflammation, which is hepatitis, we typically think of that now as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Like our diet in 10 years can do what alcohol used to take 30 years to do. But now we can take a med and cause it. And of course, our permanent muscle wasting disease called rhabdomyolysis. And then neuropathy. So back again, nerve problems. So our statin pathway that we're blocking with this is the pathway for nerve function, brain function, and muscle function. You cannot mess that up. You will mess up everything. So that's why some formulas actually say statins and PPIs are the worst medications to take long term. 3 out of 4 people are chronically managing chronic conditions. And again, this isn't short-term therapy. This is like for the rest of your life. So you're more likely to suffer a heart attack or stroke. You're very unlikely to get a benefit of preventing those. But then you're going to end up with all these complications that ruin your life, your marriage, you as a parent, you as a person. It all disintegrates because we block that pathway. So even if you did niacinamide, don't do that, because you may not be blocking that pathway, but you're blocking cholesterol production, which is vitamin D and testosterone and progesterone and anti-aging hormone and all that. So the second myth is that Lipitor prevents heart disease. And of course, studies says, research consecutively has said that's not true. So again, our hypothesis was a really good one from the start, but when the numbers don't work out, that becomes a big problem. So we found that it's more likely to cause heart disease, even depression, suicidal behavior, because progesterone's happiness, right? So what's the real cause? So as we kind of wind this up, people still want to have less heart attack and stroke. So if we say, okay, statins are probably going to cause more harm, they're not going to help, well, what the hell is the real cause? And just like everything else in our life, it's just inflammation. Virchow, back in the 1800s, he theorized that inflammation was the cause of all disease. And then that was in the 1800s, and then we fast forward to 2020, guess what? Inflammation is the cause of all disease. So, inflammation in general, which is inflammatory lifestyle, inflammatory diet, but that leads to things like lipid peroxidation too, through non-consumption of antioxidants. So then we end up with a oxidated fat, which is part of what we see in the damage process here. So one is just inflammation in general that we'll talk about, but the other one is actually the oxidation that causes this. So then people lose their fingers and toes and all that. So this is a chart that really addresses why we have all this heart disease and why it's so unique to Americans and why lowering cholesterol has not just somehow made it all better. So when we look at this, let's think about lifestyle, things that we can actually change in our life. So low omega-3s. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory fatty acids. So we'll look at a chart, omega-3 versus omega-6 and what they do to your body. But omega-3, if people take supplements, it's fish oil, so fish. Well, most Americans consume more coffee beans by pound than they do fish by pound. So we're not going to eat anything that lowers inflammation, but one serving of cold water fatty fish is just as effective as one full strength ibuprofen for getting rid of pain and inflammation. So instead of having people take aspirin, which is the leading cause of kidney failure, 70% will end up with a GI bleed within 2 weeks of taking that, and now we know it causes liver failure. You could do that for the rest of your life until you die from those instead of the heart attack, or you could eat to do the same thing, right? So other countries is called Mediterranean diet, Okinawa diet, again, Costa Rica diet, the not American diet. So fish. But if you don't like fish, what the hell do fish eat? Well, plants. So you could do algae oil for your omega-3s, or you could just eat freaking plants. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, greens. Which is, the average American eats 1 fruit or vegetable a day, so they're not going to get that from there either. No fish, no fruits and vegetables, you should have low omega-3s. But also high insulin levels, because high insulin levels are inflammatory. They actually damage arteries. Now, insulin elevates because blood sugar elevates, and insulin is required to then ring the doorbell of your cells to then put sugar in your cells until your body says, look, we can't do this anymore, and then you end up with high insulin and high sugar. So that is purely the American diet. That's the adding 150 pounds of added sugar to our diet every year. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And then you're going to destroy the arteries in your eyes and your fingers and toes and kidneys and die from those complications. High glucose, same thing, high blood sugar, right? Eating a bunch of added sugar to our diet. And then we have low vitamin D. And of course, vitamin D is cholesterol. So if you take statins, you're going to lower vitamin D, which protects 100 different cancers, makes you feel healthy and happy and awesome. The other thing, though, is vitamin D comes from the sun. So you have cholesterol in your skin, and then when the sun hits it, it makes 7 ketocholcalciferol, and then that goes to your liver, so you need a healthy liver, and that makes 25 cholecalciferol, and then it goes through your kidney and makes 125 cholecalciferol, sorry, and then that's your bioactive version of that, right? So even when they check 25, that's not even the active version, although theoretically your kidneys should be converting it. But if you get it tested, get the 125. That way you know. That's the end product out of all that. So everybody's taking vitamin D3, which is from lanolin or sheep's wool, but what if they went out of business? Then you have to go out in the damn sun, right? So we think the sun causes cancer, but that ain't true either. That cancer was like this, and then all of a sudden it went poof once we added benzene, cancer-causing chemical, to lotions to absorb UV rays. And instead of making cancer go down, it went through the roof. So that's a whole another show too. So low vitamin D because we don't go out in the sun and we block vitamin D production. And then high homocysteine. So homocysteine, 50% of that homocysteine pathway is reduced by methyl B12, the other by B6. So those are B vitamins. So that's beans, greens, fermented food, your gut bacteria. So if you take antibiotics, that lowers that, raises homocysteine, then you have more inflammatory heart disease. But if you don't eat beans, greens, or fermented foods, then you're screwed too. So the way that lowers that's nutritional. That's the only way to lower that. And that's a true inflammatory marker there, right? And then low testosterone, but again, testosterone's cholesterol. So if you take synthetic testosterone, you risk having heart attack or stroke. Same thing with synthetic estrogens. So low testosterone, because we are blocking cholesterol production. So low testosterone. But high estrogen. Now this is unique, right? Because all the other ones we're saying we're blocking it. But we're getting the high estrogens from synthetic estrogen. So if we take estradiol and we synthesize that patent and sell it to 16-year-old girls, we can have birth control. And then the risk is heart attack or stroke in the prime of your life. If we take the estradiol, that E2, and we synthesize that patent and sell it to postmenopausal women, well, we learned in the Women's Health Initiative in 2005 that it actually increased the risk of heart attack up to 87% within the first year of taking that. High synthetic estrogen is basically a heart attack. And then low nitric oxide, right? So nitrous, right? Release the NOS. But the way this works is nitrous oxide dilates your blood vessels. So then you have lower blood pressure, right? But you have to go out in the damn sunlight for nitrous oxide to be released from your dietary arginine. So again, we're back to fearing the sun, and the sun only kills Americans mostly because it hates our freedom, as we all know. So you have to go out in the damn sun. And then inflammation, which is an inflammatory diet, right? So when we look at the next slide that looks at omega-3s, omega-6s, we note that American diet is 40 times omega-6 inflammation for every one anti-inflammatory omega-3. Now, the rest of the world should be fairly balanced, so there's not that chronic inflammation. And then we look at low HDLs. So we said HDLs are a great measure of lifestyle. So if we have a crappy lifestyle, then we have crappy HDLs. We offer less protection, but we're causing all this inflammation. So HDLs, it's exercise or movement, so purposeful movement, maybe, and then add exercise if you want. But other than that, high dietary healthy fats. So back to fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens, and fish, and that's how you balance that. Oxidized LDL, so that's that lipid peroxidation. So lipid is fat, and then peroxidation is that oxidation of that fat, which then becomes damage, right? So the oxidation comes from the lack of antioxidants. And antioxidants are fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens in the brightest, richest colors. So the average American eats one fruit or vegetable a day now, but that's usually potato chips and french fries, which are not antioxidant rich, and they're usually fried. And then juice, so at least you're getting a little bit from there, maybe, right? But that's an easy thing to solve. It's just diet. High triglycerides, because again, we have excess insulin, excess sugar, because of our diets, 150 pounds of added sugar, so then we have a lot of transport, and then that becomes a problem. And then low vitamin K, which K comes from greens, so nobody's eating greens. And so, you know, everybody just takes magnesium, but the reason greens are green is magnesium, so just eat your damn greens. But that green actually helps produce vitamin K. So then if you don't eat salads, then you don't, right? And then high fibrinogen. Now, fibrinogen is the kind of clotting process. So that's your heart attacks, your strokes there, right? But, of course, research from Switzerland shows that fruits and vegetables, high fiber diet, actually breaks down fibrinogen, which then lowers heart disease. Zhejiang University in China says that green tea does the same thing. Harvard says that garlic, nuts, and red wine does the same thing. So then, you know, and there's other studies that show that fish does that, right? So then if you then say, well, what is that? Well, that's, again, back to the diet of every other country but America. So you want less clots? Don't take a bunch of aspirin that kills your kidney and liver and causes a bleeding disorder. Eat to get rid of it. And then high blood pressure, because if we look on the other side, we're not going out in the sunlight for the nitric oxide, so then we don't dilate our blood vessels, and then we're also dehydrating our blood, which then if you have less fluid, it has to constrict even harder to get blood against gravity to the brain so you can stay awake during the daytime and alert. You lower that blood pressure, then suddenly people are just like, they have orthostatic hypotension. They just like stand up too fast, get woozy, and then fall down and hit their head, and then they end up in a nursing home, and then they kill them there. So, okay, I got all excited. I love this stuff, right? So I love the solution of this, and this is why I quit medical school to do what I do. And so my doctor would already let me do this because this is life-changing stuff for people, not management, but just say how it already works and then tell people to fix it. Teach them how, right? All right, so if we go to that inflammatory omega-6, so we see omega-6 is on the left side, we see omega-3 is on the right side. So omega-6, omega-3. In nature, it should be 1-to-1, maybe 1-to-2 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. So a little bit of inflammation actually makes it stronger. But look at this the 4 major effects when we look at what if I ate an inflammatory corn-fed meat, corn-fed fish, corn-fed chicken, highly inflammatory, high omega-6 diet. Well, the 4 major outcomes from those prostaglandins are inflammation, irregular heartbeats, hypertension, and clots. More heart attack, more stroke, more hypertension, more irregular. Like, all those are cardiovascular disease. But if you look at the other side, and let's say, well, what if we ate a bunch of fish and fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, high omega-3 foods, right? It gets rid of inflammation. It normalizes heart rhythm. It normalizes your blood pressure, and it prevents clots for heart attack and stroke. Like, it's a no-brainer what the hell's going on here, which means you have control. Disease is only 1% genetic. So 90 or 99% of how long you live and the quality of your life is based on what you eat, drink, breathe, rub on your skin, how you stress. You have the greatest control over all this. So whether you eat a high omega-6 corn-fed, cheap-ass meat diet, or a high omega-3, more vegetarian, or eat meat that's more vegetarian, then you're good, right? And then the antioxidant part of that, you know, we have fats, which are lipids. We have oxidation that happens. And then we have antioxidants that block that. So then we don't have all this chronic inflammatory damage. But if you don't eat any antioxidants, fruits, vegetables, in the berries and in the richest colors, well, then it decomposes, and you create oxidases, peroxidases, and free radicals that go through and cause macular degeneration and glaucoma and aging skin and deteriorating body. But also, it's going to damage your arteries and your nerves, leading to cardiovascular disease and neuropathies. And this is why statins aren't going to do anything to this, right? This is all diet. This is all diet. This is all lifestyle and diet. So the reality is heart disease is reversible. In fact, Boston University School of Medicine did this study, and they published it in the journal, and then Prevention picked it up, and that's where I saw it. But it said that 92% of all heart disease is preventable with lifestyle, even in America, right? But look at that. 1 out of every 2 Americans is likely to have a heart attack or stroke now. More women are more likely to have a heart attack than men for the first time in history. We have to retrain doctors. You're actually getting more heart attacks in people's 20s and 30s now for the first time in history. My little sister had a heart attack at 26, and they were like, whatever, it's fine. We see it all the time. Like, that's not a big deal. That's not a, like, let's call the news. But that's crazy. That's crazy that we could, 92% is just lifestyle. Easy things that we can do. Absolutely easy things we can do. So again, it's about drinking red wine. It's about socializing. It's about not smoking, which is obvious. It's about having a healthy hip to waist ratio, which is back to kind of diet and movement. I mean, none of those 5 things were like revolutionary things. They were just things we will not do as Americans that everybody else in the world will do. So then we end up with the epidemic. We take a medication to manage that epidemic, which then it causes us more problems, which we take medications for those. And the next thing you know, you're on 12 medications and you can't afford to be healthy because you're losing everything you ever worked for to manage your disease, which is 92% preventable. I love my job, but I shake my head a lot. Yeah, I can't believe we do this stuff. So a few things as we wrap up here. You could take CoQ10, but don't block CoQ10, right? Otherwise, vitamin E, so that's real vitamin E. So vitamin E is 4 tocotrienols, 4 tocopherols, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, right? So it's 8. So vitamin E is actually 8 different Legos put together. But what we call vitamin E in supplements and medications is like alpha tocopherol. That's only 1/8 vitamin E, but we'll call it vitamin E, right? So we need real vitamin E, which is from food. Lysine, which is fish and fruits. Those are high lysine-rich foods. Fish oil, or you can eat fish, or you can eat the plants that fish eat. Olive oil, that's a wonderful one. It's a healthy anti-inflammatory. So if you use olive oil in your diet all the time, making food, you're constantly knocking down pain and inflammation. And then my favorites are ginger and turmeric, which some people have food sensitivities to, but half the world eats those things. Ginger and turmeric both are anti-inflammatories, very powerful anti-inflammatories, but they also deplaque your arteries. So these are all things that, again, if you cause damage, upregulate the LDLBs through the IPA and LPA and the APOB 100, and you repair that damage. These are the things that sand that stuff back down and repaint the wall so you can have all the damage you want, but you don't end up having a heart attack or stroke from it. So there's a lot more to this, but we'll talk about also when we talk about reversing, look at the next one when we talk about reversing type 2 diabetes. It's a lot of the same stuff that you want to do, right? So the recap is we now statistically know that statins do not prevent heart attacks. We know that lowering cholesterol is dangerous to your health and your happiness. We know that high cholesterol does not cause heart attacks. We know oxidation is the cause of atherosclerosis, not just the cholesterol, but the damage of it because we don't eat enough antioxidants. We know heart disease is preventable, at least 92%, right? And to reduce that, we know we can do things like restorative kind of lifestyle. So relaxation response, low glycemic diet, purposeful movement. It's all just lifestyle stuff, right? We want to create a lifestyle that's consistent with life and longevity without gimmicks and nonsense. That's how we get people's lives back for them, right? So, thank you guys. I know we usually do this live, and we'll have live more once we all survive this 2020 apocalypse. So this will be good. You'll kind of have an idea of what I do when we come to the live talks, but I definitely want to make sure to sit down and figure out the technology of how to put these things online for you guys, since most of you guys are home, want to watch stuff anyway, so, you know. Our website is nourishpurifyheal.com or drgarrett.tv, which you see down here. You'll see the YouTube channel is youtube.com/C/ and then the Dr. G Show. So no period, just DRGSHOW. So, but if you're watching this, you probably found it. So, and I'll also post this to Facebook too. All right. Let me know in your comments, your thoughts. Join us for the next few health talks. I'm going to do a COVID 2019 update for you guys because people are back to panicking again, and it's statistically, it's not panic worthy, prepared worthy, but not panic worthy. So we're all going to be fine. All right. Let me know your questions. I appreciate you guys spending time with me today watching this. And please make sure that you like this and also share this, especially through YouTube. All right. Bye, you guys. And I think you guys can watch this on your TV with YouTube. I think. So, all right. Bye, you guys. I appreciate you.